If not for Muhammad Ali, this man could have been the greatest heavyweight of all time. To understand this statement, one needs to understand the history behind George Foreman's legendary career. You see, Foreman experienced the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows. Perhaps no man in history has experienced what he's gone through. But it was after his lowest moments that he showed the world a legend's heart. Despite his failure, like a phoenix, Foreman rose from the ashes and was reborn anew. From the ashes, Foreman flew to the highest heights once again and accomplished something that no one else has ever done before. Yes, from his iconic defeat to Muhammad Ali, to the recapturing of the world title once again as a 45-year-old. This is an iconic story that needs to be remembered. You see, Big George was once an unbeatable monster that relied on his terrifying size and strength to bully his opponents. When Foreman was cleverly defeated by Ali, he was 40-0 with a 93% knockout ratio. But his cruel physicality would soon lose its meaning, and his aura of invincibility would be lost. Retiring 2 years after the iconic event that cemented Ali's legacy, at the expense of Foreman's legacy, Foreman retired and went soul-searching. 10 years later, he made a comeback at the age of 38, and it would take him a total of 7 years to capture the throne once again. This time, he came back with the finesse, grace, and wisdom that the 25-year-old Foreman never had, accomplishing the impossible. Fight fans, welcome back to another episode of Striking Breakdowns. In this episode, we tell the legend of George Foreman, the oldest heavyweight world champion in history. Like so many great fighters, Foreman came from absolutely nothing. Raised without his biological father, Foreman dropped out of high school and turned to a life of crime. But under the encouragement of a great counselor, things took a turn when he started training boxing. Falling in love with the sweet science, the transition from thug to boxing prospect began. Foreman's rise was as prolific and explosive as it gets. Within a year of training, he qualified for the Olympics, a feat that is unrivaled in boxing. And within 2 years of training, Foreman captured the Olympic gold medal. To top it off, the man he defeated was the Soviet Union champion with 220 fights and also 10 years his senior. Foreman maintained that to this day, this was the proudest accomplishment in his boxing career. Shortly after winning the Olympics, Foreman turned pro, and within 6 months, he racked up 13 wins. Within 4 years of turning pro, he was undefeated in 37 fights and ready to face the undefeated world champion Joe Frazier. He went in as the underdog, but completely dominated the fight with a total of 6 knockdowns. Foreman's first 2 title defenses were nothing short of legendary, knocking Jose Roman out in the first round, and the great Ken Norton out in the second round. At only 25 years old, Foreman looked absolutely unstoppable. 40-0 with a 93% knockout ratio created an aura of invincibility. Everyone was afraid of this invincibility. That is, everyone except for Muhammad Ali. In what was a true mega fight, both Ali and Foreman were offered an inflation-adjusted $27 million each. This fight would be the most watched sports event of their time, watched by as many as 1 billion television viewers around the world. After a 3-year layoff due to being penalised for dodging the US military draft, Ali lost to 2 fighters Foreman had dominated. Although he would avenge the losses to Ken Norton and Joe Frazier right before facing Foreman, everyone wrote Ali off. After all, he was an aging fighter and Foreman looked absolutely unstoppable.
The time may have come to say goodbye to Muhammad Ali, because very honestly, I don't think he can beat George Foreman.
But as history's fate would go, Ali had a plan that would change Foreman's life forever.
You, George Foreman, all of you chumps are gonna bow when I whoop him. All of you. I know you got him. I know you got him picked, but the man's in trouble. I'm gonna show you how great I am.
In the fight, young Foreman was cleverly outmaneuvered by the clever Ali. Employing the now famous rope-a-dope and with ruthless taunting, Foreman took the bait and wasted his energy for 8 rounds. When the right opportunity came, Ali unloaded a spectacular combination that ended the fight. Without a sportsman's spirit, Foreman claimed that he must have been drugged and that the opponent's corner tampered with the looseness of the ropes. Big George lost his invincibility that day, and with it, his confidence. To prove that he was still a monster, Foreman fought 5 men in one night. But instead of creating good publicity, what he got was more taunts from Ali and the media. This event zapped what little confidence he had left. After taking a year off fighting, Foreman would make a run at the title again. But after losing to Jimmy Young a year later, he decided to retire and become a Christian preacher. Due to an early retirement at only 28 years old, we never got to see Foreman in his prime. If it wasn't for Ali, we may have seen an undefeated heavyweight champion with the highest knockout ratio of all time. But as fate would go, the early retirement led him to do some soul searching. Big George gave up a lot of his material possessions and did not train a single moment during his 10 years away from boxing. He found passion in building a community, so that's what he did, building a youth centre to help kids. But eventually the money ran out and Foreman needed to fund the youth centre. What could be more meaningful than lacing up the gloves once again to fight for kids who need his help? This time, Foreman wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for the people who needed him. So with a new purpose to fight, George Foreman started to make a historic comeback at the age of 38. He was now facing a completely new generation of boxers, and he knew he couldn't fight the best right away. After 10 years of not training, he started fighting journeymen. During this time of development, it was apparent that Foreman had a new style. Rather than relying on brute aggression like his younger days, he became defensively savvy and technically sharp. In fact, there are many moments of slick movement from the older Foreman, something rarely seen in heavyweights. Initially overweight, Big George slimmed down with each fight, and eventually started challenging real contenders. His first major victory was against the former champion Dwight Muhammad Qawi. To many people's surprise, Foreman won the fight via a 7th round knockout. It's as if he corrected all of his weaknesses from the younger days. No longer was he fatiguing in the late rounds, and he was now being selective with his now clean punches. But he wasn't just landing clean shots to earn decision wins. He won 18 fights in a row via knockout or TKO. In 4 years, Foreman would go 24 fights without losing a single time. And by the age of 42, he racked up 23 knockouts against 24 opponents. This earned him a triple world title challenge against the then undefeated legendary champion Evander Holyfield.
I'm just a big old baby boomer, and I'm gonna load a boom on that baby, Evander Holyfield.
George Foreman. Mr. Foreman, if you think you're gonna beat me, you off your rocker.
Most people wrote off Foreman, citing that he was too old to put up a competitive fight. But he proved the critics wrong. 42-year-old George Foreman took on a legendary undefeated champion in his prime, and not only did he last the whole fight, it was extremely competitive too. 2 years later, he challenged Tommy Morrison for the vacant WBO world title. But again he would lose a competitive fight via unanimous decision. This looked like the end of Foreman's career. At the age of 44, no one believed that he would regain his title ever again. But Foreman never lost faith in himself and his dream to become the oldest heavyweight champion in history. The stubborn spirit that destroyed him 15 years ago against Ali would now be imbued with a resilient wisdom. This is what allowed him to shock the world by doing the impossible. At the age of 45, Foreman was offered against another undefeated world champion in Michael Moorer. A 26-year-old champion in his prime facing the almost 46-year-old fighter seemed like easy money. After all, it had been 20 years since Foreman won a world title, and he failed both title challenges against young fighters in their prime. In this fight, it appeared the critical pundits were right. Foreman was fighting back well, but he was losing every round. By round 8, he was clearly losing on the scorecards and looked like he was fading. Like a flashback to the Ali fight, which also ended in the 8th round, Foreman was almost taken out by his opponent. However, this time, rising like a phoenix, he never went down and he emerged out of the 9th round to make a spectacular comeback. His right hand was now finding a home, landing more than he's landed this whole fight. And in the 10th round, Foreman was the one coming forward and pressuring the younger fighter. You see, Foreman was reserving his energy for the late rounds, just like the clever Muhammad Ali had done to him over 20 years ago. With Angelo Dundee in his corner, who was Ali's coach that cornered against Foreman 20 years ago, they planned for this. They knew the champion had better endurance and would try to overwhelm the older champion. So they reserved their energy until the late rounds, and decided to show Foreman's power late to try to go for a finish. Now Foreman was putting heat behind the right hand that he'd been practicing the whole fight. In the 10th round, Big George did the impossible by knocking out the younger champion with a short 1-2 combo that landed twice in a row. At the age of 45, Foreman did something no heavyweight has ever done in the history of boxing. Right after the knockout, Foreman got onto his knees and prayed, eventually embracing the promoter and his corner. The crowd went absolutely crazy, cheering for the historic event that they just witnessed live. No one believed Foreman would win the title again at the age of 45, just like no one believed Ali would win the title challenge against the younger Foreman. In this fight, it's almost as if he embodied the spirit of Ali and also reversed all of the mistakes he made in the iconic fight that changed his life 20 years ago. Perhaps this was all part of his plan, as on this night he wore the very same shorts as when he lost to Muhammad Ali 20 years ago. In any case, it was beautifully poetic in every way possible. After the great accomplishment, Foreman forfeited the WBA title after this fight, but defended his other titles for 3 more fights against real contenders. His final fight would be against Shannon Briggs, and Foreman would lose an extremely controversial decision. Most of the viewers thought Foreman had won, including the official judges. Unlike his younger self, he was gracious in defeat. And although he would have been slated to fight the great Lennox Lewis had he won this fight, this controversial fight would ultimately be his last. At the age of 48, Foreman retired with the prospect of coming back at 50 years old and again at 55 years old, but it never happened. It was an absolutely spectacular career, and Foreman reversed all the curse he had suffered in his youth. In many ways, through his career, he transcended as a human being. Near the end of his career, Foreman made a deal with a grill company. In what would now be known as the George Foreman Grill, he made an estimated $200 million, substantially more than what he made as a boxer. His success as a boxer turned businessman gave future boxers a blueprint to navigate their life after boxing. Thank you, George Foreman, for giving combat sports such a big part of yourself. If you enjoyed this episode, please do watch another episode of Striking Breakdowns. I'm Lawrence Kenshin, and thank you for keeping our channel alive.
Wonderful man. God bless you. And remember, the George Foreman lean, mean, fat reducing grilling machine.